Hey everybody, how we doing? She started laughing and all of a sudden it's hey. Just in case you're wondering, I'm not sweating. This shirt is it's supposed to look like outer space, and I know, yeah, all the kids are doing it these days. It's real cool. So, yeah, my name is Reed, and I'm super glad you guys are here. Welcome to the best night of the week, and God bless you down front. So we've been in a series called The Struggle is Real, where we've been talking about real struggles that we all deal with, and I think it's been a real cool series. We've talked about, at the very beginning, we talked about lying and how we struggle with this desire to want to lie, whether it's to be cool or whether it's to cover things up, right? We all want to lie, but you know, we said, hey, you know what, even though the truth can be scary, it's the truth that sets you free. And so we want to be people that live in the truth. And so then we talked about the struggle with anger. And we said, hey, you know what, if you don't learn to control your anger, then anger is ultimately going to control you. And it's going to be a harmful emotion, not just for yourself, but also for others around you. And so we got to learn how to handle it in healthy ways. And then last week we talked about worry. And what do we do when we face situations that cause us to worry, to stress out, to get anxious? And we said, hey, you know what? God has invited us to bring our worries to Him in prayer. And the promise that He gives isn't necessarily to change our situation, but He promises to bring us peace in every situation. We can always come to Him with our worries, with our stress, with our anxiety. And tonight we're going to talk about a different kind of struggle. Tonight we're going to talk about this struggle of conformity. You guys know what conformity? You know what that word means? It's basically just doing what everybody else does, right? Like conform. And some of y'all are probably thinking like, not me, I'm different. Yeah, I'm different. You know, like whatever. And so you think you're just so different, right? Like, but let's be honest, right? Like, let's be honest. Everyone in here, you can all think of a time where you've done something or said something in order just to fit in with what everybody else was doing, right? Like everyone in here can think of at least one time. I was like rattling off like times where I've done this, right? It starts at a very early age. I can remember being in second grade playing football at Shiloh, and all the kids were getting lightning bolts on their heads, and they were getting numbers in the back of their head, their football number. And I thought, I can't be the only one, right? Like, I have to do this. I was like, Mom, you gotta let me get the lightning bolts in the side of my head and my number. And my dad was like, nah, you're not doing that, right? Like, you're definitely not doing that. And I was like, Dad, you're so stupid. You know, like, I just remember being so devastated. And so when my dad went out of town, my mom took me to the barber shop. And so I got lightning bolts. I know, like a little mini Chris Brown, right? These guys ain't lying. And so I was just, oh my gosh, right? With my lightning bolts and my number on the back of my head. And just like, what is going on, right? I remember the first time I ever said a bad word, right, was because I wanted to fit in. I was on the bus, and these kids were like, Reed doesn't say bad words because he's a goody-goody. And I was like, I am not a goody-goody. I am so bad. I am bad, right? And they were like, no, you're good. You never said a bad word ever. And I was like, I say so many bad words. I say all of them. And they were like, no, we've never, just say one. And I was like, oh no, right? I have to say it, right? So then on the bus, on my way to Norton Elementary School, I was like, bleep, bleep! And they were like, oh, he bad, right? Like, and so there it was, right? There it was, right? Just that struggle to want to fit in, to conform. Everybody else is saying the bad words on the back of the bus. So I had to do it, right? I remember in middle school, right? Everybody was getting these shoes. They were called Timberlands, right? I know, South Gwinnett, what y'all know about that? So everybody was getting Timberlands, right? These boots. And I came home and I was like, Mom, I gotta get some Timbs. And she was like, what are these Timberlands? And I was like, what you got the boots? You know, like, and so I had to get the boots. And here's the deal, I didn't even like these boots. I didn't think that they looked good. They weighed about 75 pounds per boot. And so it was like walking around. If you've ever worn Chacos, it was similar to that. I know, some people are like, don't hate, it's okay, you have bricks stuck to your feet. So, very heavy, it was like, oh my gosh, I did not even like the boots, but I wore them every single day because everybody else at my school was wearing these boots, right? I had to conform, I had to fit in. I remember when I was in 10th grade, another time where I did something where I really wanted to fit in. I remember all the guys in the locker room, before practice, they were sitting around, we were waiting on coach, and this guy pulls out a can of dip, and he's like, you know, do that packing thing, I don't do it, I have tiny hands. And so, you know, and he packs his dip can, and he's like, Hey man, you want to throw in a dip? And I was like, no. Like, no, I don't want to, but I couldn't say that out loud. And so all these guys are doing it, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's my turn. I have to do this. I've never done this. I grabbed the little thing, I throw it in my mouth. It spreads everywhere. Swallowed half of it. And so as I go out to practice, I'm like, guys, I don't feel good. Do you guys feel like this? They're like, ah! And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I just remember the entire practice. I was like, yeah! And it was terrible, right? I did not like doing that, but I did it. Why? Because everybody else was doing it, right? Because I wanted to fit in, because it was way more comfortable to conform, right? And when it comes to a lot of things, especially in high school, right, it just feels a lot of times like it's more comfortable to conform and just to do what everybody else is doing, doesn't it? Totally. It's the reason why, like, a week and a half ago, right, starter packs just went rampant. Like, oh, everybody's doing it, I gotta do it, what's my starter pack, right? Like, and so everybody's just going nuts on Twitter about these starter packs, right? Like it just feels like it's just, I want to make sure I fit in. I want to make sure that I'm doing this, right? Like, I gotta make sure, all the cool kids. And we feel that. You guys, you feel that. You feel that desire, that desire to want to fit in, right? It feels good when you fit in. It's comfortable to conform. Sometimes it just feels like it's easier just to do what everybody else is doing. Just to act like everybody else, just to talk like everybody else, just to try the same things that everybody else is trying, just to dress like everybody else, just to get, your hair cut the same way as everybody else. Feels like it's just more comfortable to conform. It feels like it's easier. It feels like it's easier to tweet the same as everybody else, or subtweet the same as everybody else. It feels like it's more comfortable to post the same stuff on Instagram so you can get so many likes. It feels like it's way easier to treat relationships the same, or to try things at parties the same as everybody else. I didn't realize I struck a chord. This is an emotional part of my sermon. I know, she's really feeling torn up about that. We'll pray for her at the end. So it does. It feels like it's way more comfortable to conform, doesn't it? When it comes to those things in your life, when it comes to being a high school student, it just feels way more comfortable to conform. It feels way easier just to fall back and sort of want to fit in. And yet, you guys, as comfortable as it is, as comfortable as conformity might feel, here's the reality that I want you all to know, that there's a problem with conformity. And that actually conformity is going to cost you something. Right? Conformity is going to cost you something. If it doesn't hurt you or somebody else, it's actually going to cost you something even bigger than that. You see, I believe that there is a God, right, who's created each and every single one of us. And he's created us uniquely with a purpose and a plan for our lives. But here's the deal. You will never find the calling and the purpose that God has placed on your life if you're spending your life trying to be like everybody else. Do you guys get that? Like, you will never find the purpose and the calling that God has placed on your life if you're spending your life trying to fit in and be like everybody else. You see, there's a cost that comes with conformity. And so what I wanted to share with you tonight is I wanted you to see what God is calling us, the way that God is calling us to live, so that we don't have to struggle with this conformity anymore. We can actually embrace this different kind of life that Jesus has to offer. And so what I wanted to do, I want to take you over to 1 Peter. And the reason why I picked 1 Peter is because in the book of 1 Peter, he's writing to a group of people that were dealing with this same struggle of conformity. They had become Christians, and now the Christian life, they were finding it to be kind of difficult. And if you have become a follower of Jesus and you've actually tried to live this thing out, you'll know the same thing that these people found out, is that it's not always easy to be a Christian, is it? Especially not in high school, right? It's not always easy to be a Christian. Sometimes it's actually kind of scary to be different. And so you're like, oh my gosh, like it's cool to do my GCIO thing here, but then when I get to school, I gotta be like everybody else. And that's what these people were wrestling with in the book of 1 Peter. They had become Christians, they had started living out their faith, and then they caught a bunch of crap for it. And now all of a sudden they were being persecuted, they were being made fun of. Some of them were even going so far as to being put to death. And so they were saying, wait a minute, this is really, really hard to follow Jesus. Maybe it would just be easier, it would be more comfortable just to fall back and fit in. Just to do things the way that everybody else is doing them. That was way more comfortable than following Jesus. And I want you guys to see what Peter says to them. This is in 1 Peter chapter 1. We can put it up there. I don't know if it's the same. Did you do ESV or NIV? He doesn't know. I'm reading from the extra special version. So this is starting in verse 14. It says, "As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance." A little different. "But as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all of your conduct, since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy." So Peter's talking to this group of people, and he's like, hey, you know what? Like, I know that it feels like it would be more comfortable just to fall back and fit in. I know that it feels like it would just be easier just to conform and to do what everybody else is doing. But, he says, I want you to remember that God's got a plan and a purpose for your life, and it's this. He says, I want you to be holy, just as the one who called you is holy. Now, I don't know what you guys think about when you hear holy. Maybe you think about, like, the Pope and his hat and his golf cart that's bulletproof. I don't know. I don't know if you think about the Duggars, right, with their denim dresses and things like that. I don't know. I don't know what you think about when you think about holy. I don't know if maybe you think about that super judgmental kid at school that's like sinners. They're all a bunch of sinners. And like, I don't know if that's what you think about when you think about holy, right? Like, I don't know what comes to mind when you hear that word holy, right? But the word holy, it simply means set apart, right? Or you could just say different. And so when Peter's writing this, he's like, hey, look, I don't want you to conform. I don't want you to go back to fitting in and just doing what everybody else does. There's a bigger call on your life. There's a unique call for your life. And so he says, hey, you know what? I actually want you to be different, just as the one that called you, Jesus, is different. He says, I want you to be different. I want you to, I think we have the statement up there, I want you to live different. This is what Peter is telling this group of people, this group of Christians that are struggling with this desire to want to conform and just fit in. He says, no. He says, there's something better. He says, I want you to live different. And it's not just different for the sake of being different, right? It's not 2 Chainz different. It's not Lady Gaga different. He's not just saying, like, I want you to be different. So everybody, like, oh my gosh, like, change your fashion trends and stuff. He's not talking about that kind of different. He says, I want you to be different just as the one who has called you was different. So he says, I want you to live different like Jesus was different, right? So he says, I want you to look at Jesus' life, and I want you to start to do those things. I want you to live different like Jesus. And so when I was thinking, oh my gosh, like, what does it look like to live different like Jesus? I started thinking about all the ways that Jesus was different, and I just wanted to rattle off some. When I was thinking about living different like Jesus, I was thinking, hey, you know what? Jesus was selfless instead of selfish. He thought about other people. He would have thought about his family before he would have thought about his own needs. He would have thought about his brothers and sisters before he thought about his own needs. He thought about his friends before he thought about himself, right? He was selfless. Jesus he was generous. He didn't think about all the things that he was going to get, but he was always looking to how he could give. He was forgiving. He didn't look about trying to get revenge or holding grudges. He was extending forgiveness. Jesus was patient. He wasn't just expecting people to change right away. You better change. Oh my gosh, Kim, you said a bad word. No, Jesus was patient with people. He wasn't judgmental. Jesus was invitational. He invested in people. Jesus was so different. And Peter says, hey, you know what? Like, don't conform. Don't just do like everybody else. He says, no, there's a bigger call on your life. He says, you're supposed to look different, the way that Jesus looked different. So he says, look at Jesus' life and start to do some of those things. And then, you guys, the incredible thing that Peter points out, the incredible thing that becomes possible when you'll choose to follow God's plan for your life instead of what the world is pitching to you, he says there's something that's incredible that becomes possible. He goes on in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 12, and he says this. He says, keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, meaning basically, hey, live different. It says, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. He says, hey, you know what? When you'll choose to live different, the way that Jesus was different, when you won't just run the play that the world is telling you to run and conform and do like everybody else, when you'll actually live out this stuff that we talk about each and every week here in this room, he says, when you'll do that, when you'll choose to live different, then this is what will start to happen. You'll start to make a difference. When you'll choose to live different, he says something incredible starts to happen, and that is that you'll begin to make a difference. And he goes, I don't know about you, but at the end of the day, I want my life to count for something. And I don't want to do just what everybody else is doing. And I don't want to look back on the short amount of time that I had on this earth and say, yeah, I fit in and just did what everybody else was doing. No. I want to make a difference. I want my life to count for something. And that's what God wants for my life. And that's what God wants for your life. And that's why he's calling you. He's saying, hey, you know what? Don't conform. Live different so that you can make a difference. If you'll begin to live the way that Jesus showed us how to live, he says, you know what? That's not just for you. That's not so that you can be judgmental at school and look down on people and feel better about yourself. No. The reason why I want you to live different is because then you'll start to make a difference. If you'll start to live out this stuff, even in this series, just think for a second, can you imagine what it would look like if you guys actually started to live out the things that we talked about just in this series? I'm not even talking about the whole year that we've gone through together. Just in this series, if you started to live that stuff out. If you decided you were going to be a truth teller, hey, you know what? I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to make things up. I'm not going to cover up all this stuff. I'm going to be somebody that tells the truth. I'm going to speak the truth in love with people. And instead of letting anger get the best of me, you know what? No. I'm going to learn to control my anger, and I'm going to handle it in a healthy way. And instead of worrying and stressing out and being anxious and letting that control all of my emotions, if instead of doing that, if I chose to bring my worries to God in every situation through prayer, and I sought God and got his peace, can you imagine, you guys, that kind of life is so attractive. Can you imagine the difference that your life would begin to make in the lives of others? Can you imagine people would start to look at your life and go, whatever he or she's got, I want some of that. You see, guys, you weren't born to conform. You're built to make a difference. You were not born to conform. You were built to make a difference. And Peter reminds us right here. He says, hey, I know it's comfortable. I know it seems easy. I know that seems like the best way because it feels good to fit in. And he says, I promise you, if you'll live different, if you'll take God up on his call, you're going to find purpose and meaning for your life that you can't find anywhere else. And you'll find that your life is going to begin to make a difference. And I don't know about you, but that's what I want to be said about my life when it comes to the end. I want it to be able to be said, that guy made a difference because of the way that he lived his life. He didn't run the play like everybody else. He followed this Jesus. He lived different, and he made a difference. And that's what could be said about you. And that's what I hope would be said about you. As we were praying for you guys before this service even started, we were praying, hey, you know what? I hope that your schools, I hope that North Gwinnett High School, I hope that Buford High School, I hope that Lanier High School, I hope that these schools look different because you guys are there. I hope that your families are different because you guys are there, because that's the plan and the purpose that God has for your life, that everywhere that you go, you would live different to make a difference. And so as we go to small groups here in a minute, that's what I want you to be thinking of. What does it look like for me to begin to live different so that I can make a difference? What would it look like for me to not just conform and to fit in and do what everybody else is doing, but what would it look like for me to begin to live out the stuff that I'm learning here so that my life looks different and so that my life makes a difference? Let me pray for you guys. Jesus, thank you so much for this reminder in your word. I thank you so much that you have a plan and a purpose for each and every student who's sitting here tonight. And God, I pray that we wouldn't settle for just simply trying to be like everybody else. But God, I pray that we would embrace this life of purpose and meaning and passion that you have for us. God, I pray that these students, you would fill them with courage to be able to live different so that they can make a difference at whatever school they're going back to, whatever group of friends they're going back to, whatever sports team they're going back to, whatever home they're going back to. God, I pray that you would fill them with the courage to live different, to live like you, Jesus. Not judgmentally, not to be different so that people will look at them, but to be different so that they can make a difference. Jesus, that's what we hope. And so, God, I pray that wherever these students go from here would look a little bit different because of the way that they're living out what they're learning. It's in your beautiful name that I pray, Jesus, and everybody in the house said. All right, you guys go to small groups. If you don't know where you're going, come talk to me. I'll be standing right here.